Most people tend to think that willpower is a forceful ability to suppress oneself and desires. This is not entirely true. To understand what willpower is, let's start by considering our stimuli and desires, or rather, what stimulates our desires. The starter for our behavior and desires are the visual patterns that are the configurations for our stimuli. These visual patterns not only stimulate our desires, but they also form the traits of a character, and the brighter the visual patterns and reactions to them, the stronger the desires. Our visual patterns contain the meaning and values of a certain behavior, and in order to understand and define a specific behavior, first of all, we need to realize the visual patterns which prompt us to actions. There are three main principles of generating the visual patterns. The first principle is the situational or circumstantial patterns. It is worth noting that often in the same situation we all generate different visual patterns that correspond to our personal traits. And the second source of our visual patterns is a verbal description. When we read a book, for example, we generate the images in our imagination based on what we read. And the third principle, which is one of the main ones, is when visual patterns are generated by our needs. When we are hungry, we imagine our favorite foods, thus trying to saturate our imagination. And on the contrary, if an image of our favorite food arises in our minds, it raises our appetite and physical reflex in the form of salivation. Therefore, if we can control our imagination, this means that we can control our desires, reducing or increasing their manifestation depending on our goal. Easy for you to say, you will probably say, and in fact, controlling our thoughts is not an easy task and it requires some practice. When we are unable to properly utilize our will, the visual patterns themselves derive a certain behavior from us, thereby dictating to us our behavior. And on the contrary, when we are able to use our will, we can control our thoughts and our visual patterns, reproducing and generating the right visual representations to cause the desired outcome. The whole idea of willpower lies in the ability to think in such a way that will allow us to achieve and realize our goals. Willpower represents the ability to control one's mental world versus of suppressing oneself and our already formed desires from the perspective of self-oppression and mental abuse. Emotional barriers are internal obstacles that interfere with certain actions. The more emotional barriers we have in us, the more difficult it is to cope with any habits, change a lifestyle, or engage in any form of self-development. Self-awareness does not only include the study of one's will, but it also involves the study of one's emotional barriers that prevent us from making a willful decision. Self-awareness and willpower development is set to eliminate these internal emotional blocks. Our needs almost always manifest in certain actions that lead to their satisfaction. Our needs are recognized in visual patterns. These patterns reflect objects and situations of the past experiences of satisfying these needs. The visual patterns are particularly important and they reflect on the actions that were targeted to satisfy certain needs. If there are no visual representations or patterns, there are simply no needs. For example, did this ever happen to you when you got carried away by some work or a task and you forgot to eat? But then as soon as you started thinking and imagining a hot pizza, your stomach immediately responded with emotion, and only then you noticed the feeling of hunger. Therefore, the lack of visual representations of food leads us to lack of hunger. The entire cognitive structure is based on our needs and actions aimed at their satisfaction. Therefore, the development of willpower involves and consists of their management. The visual patterns that motivate us to certain behavior are called motivators, and their strength lies not in the fact that they cause specific experiences, but in the expectations of certain experiences. It is the expectation of experience satisfaction and not satisfaction itself that creates the impetus to achieve the goal. This anticipation of experience of satisfaction is only possible if there was such experience in the past. The stronger this experience was in the past, the greater the motivation for action, or the stronger the motivation for behavior. Therefore, the more pleasure we receive from meeting a specific need in the past, the stronger the motivation that is created by anticipating the these experiences. A motive not only expresses a need but also provides a behavior with a meaning, directs it to the object in which the need finds its satisfaction. Therefore, the knowledge of our motives allows us to predict the directions of our behavior and thereby control it. Motives arise at the expense of the needs and fit on them, no matter how sophisticated we are in managing our motives. But if at the same time our needs remain out of control, then there will be no self-regulation or self-growth. Our needs are a lot stronger than our motives. Needs by themselves are not able to influence our behavior. This requires desire and a situation that will cause the formation of visual patterns corresponding to the need. The main stages from forming to satisfying a need cycle, from the need situation, the actualization of visual patterns, the anticipation of satisfaction in connection with the need images, and the emergence of motives and a certain behavior that aimed at specific goals. One who tries to exercise the willpower by suppressing his needs will always be defeated. Of course, up to a certain point, we're all able to suppress the needs and desires. But if you lose your vigilance in the state of internal conflict, or if the crisis weakens your will, the needs immediately seize the situation and begin to dominate, as before. Our needs are controlled by determining the attitude to the idea of a need and increasing the ability to control our imagination and the way of thinking by forming and developing the new mental skills. And as always, thank you for watching.